Few issues are as emotionally charged as a person's right to die. Central to that debate in Australia is euthanasia crusader Dr. Philip Nitschke. His group, Exit International, advertises workshops for those aged 50 years and over or the seriously ill to teach people how to take their life safely. Dr. Nitschke's group also advises Australians how to import and safely administer the euthanasia drug nembutal. But some families and friends are concerned about who's being advised by Dr. Nitschke. This story from Caitlin Gribben and Dale Owens.
Earlier this year across Australia, police raided at least a dozen properties. It was an unprecedented crackdown on the growing euthanasia movement.
Members of the voluntary euthanasia group Exit International have had their homes raided by police looking for illegal euthanasia drug.
Police were searching for nembutal, which is illegal to import into Australia. The raids targeted members of Exit International, an organisation founded by euthanasia advocate Dr. Philip Nitschke.
Person would go home. This is typically a person would walk outside or go home or come home to find 5, usually 7 police.
One of the people raided was Perth man Nigel Brayley, who was not an obvious euthanasia candidate. He was 45 and had just lost a high-paying job in the oil and gas industry. Close friends Trish and Kerry O'Neill could see Nigel's life spiralling after the death of his wife, Lena.
Well, I guess, the last 8-9 months of his life were quite horrendous for him.
Lena Brayley died at a local quarry in 2011, which was first thought to be an accident. Late last year, the case was upgraded to a murder inquiry.
The police obviously felt that he was a suspect. That was fairly clear. Later on, they did a press release at the Strand Quarry. Nigel was not advised of that, where they announced that it was now a murder inquiry.
Police never named Nigel Brayley as a suspect. However, he told Trish and Kerry the investigation and the loss of his job had made him depressed. By April, things had come to a head.
As he was actually leaving, he looked very upset, and I kissed him goodbye, and then I went after him and I said, because he was a big man, I put my arms around his waist and I said, "I hate to see you like this." And he said, just got me, and he said, "You've no idea how hard you make it for me when you do this." And of course he was planning on something within days.
In a suicide note, Nigel Brayley said he would end his life beside his mother's grave at Perth's Karrakatta Cemetery.
We came down here, but we didn't find him because he must have been disturbed, I think, at some point before, he suicided, and his body was found about 200 metres away.
Nigel Brayley had taken the euthanasia drug of choice, nembutal, to end his life. Kerry O'Neill was baffled and searched for answers by looking at Nigel's email account.
What did particularly horrified me was that there had been an exchange of emails between himself and Dr. Philip Nitschke.
Oh, we had a lot of communication with Nigel. We have a usual age of 50. He came at a younger age. I think he was 45 or 46. Oh, well, he was a person who recognised that this is an important issue, that it's better to have thought about this and be prepared rather than leave things to a point where you become perhaps too incapacitated or for some other reason unable to carry out these things yourself.
The email revealed how Nigel had consulted Dr. Nitschke.
Nigel was very explicit in replying to Philip Nitschke that he was going to take his life within the next fortnight. Also that he was not a terminally ill person in any way, that he was presumably fit and healthy, but just going through a flat period in the previous 9 months of his life, like many people do.
Is it possible that Dr. Nitschke thought Nigel was buying the drug nembutal to stockpile for older age?
No, because he talked about his final statement, and you'll receive my final statement within the next 2 weeks. It was pretty definite.
Dr. Nigel Brayley's family have given us some emails where the two of you were corresponding.
Yes.
In that, Nigel Brayley tells you that he is 45 years old. He says he is not terminally ill and that he plans to take his life in 2 weeks. On the second page.
When he says he plans to take his life in 2 weeks, yes. Okay, and what did we say?
Did you try to stop him? Did you communicate with him that perhaps he should seek some sort of counselling?
No, if a person comes along and says to me that they've made a rational decision to end their life in 2 weeks, I don't go along and say, have you made a rational decision? Do you think you better think about it? Why don't you go off and have a counsellor come along and talk to you? We don't do that.
Why not if they're suicidal and depressed?
Well, okay, were they depressed?
He says that he's suffering. He says he's not terminally ill.
He said he's suffering? Let's have a close look at this. Show me where it says he's suffering.
Yes, on the second page.
Okay, let's have a look at it.
In that paragraph, Nigel Brayley says, I don't honestly fit neatly under Exit's charter of supporting a terminal medical illness. However, I am suffering and have been now for some 9 months.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Again, I don't know what you're suggesting I should do. When he says he's suffering, that I should come along and say, I'm not going to give you the information because you might use it. If a person is so depressed that they are lost capacity, they can't articulate anything. The fact that he was so insightful in his decision to make this choice indicates to me that he was indeed a person had not lost capacity. I'm not saying he wasn't depressed, but was he so depressed that we should constrain him? Should we have certified him? Should we have put him into a psychiatric institution? Should we have restricted him in some way? Of course not. He was not at that level of depression. And people like that should not have their freedom curtailed. So I would object to that idea that you're saying he's depressed, therefore we shouldn't talk to him.
Nigel Brayley clearly says that he is going to commit suicide within the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
Did you think you had a duty of care, an obligation as a doctor to tell Nigel to seek medical care from a GP or a psychiatrist?
No.
His family would have hoped that you would have done that?
Well, his family would have hoped that he did it. I mean, his family would have... look, the person made a rational decision and I'm not going to come along and try and second guess him on that one.
I think most people would assume their role is quite clearly for people who are terminally ill, suffering, reaching the end of their life, and they're really in that situation where, life has become intolerable in a physical sense. Not for people that are just simply going through a down period in their life. Everyone goes through down periods in their life.
The point was that he came along and he gives a very good account for himself. And if a 45-year-old comes to a rational decision to end his life, researches it in the way he does meticulously and decides that now is the time of life, now is the time I wish to end my life, they should be supported. And we did support him in that.
He was very happy, funny. He didn't get angry very often. He was interested in everything and everyone.
On the surface, 25-year-old Joe Waterman seemed to have it all.
What are you guys thinking about?
Joe, he was a unique person. He was very gentle.
Is it me?
Is it me?
It starts with P.
Joe?
Me?
Is it no?
Joe lived on Victoria's Mornington Peninsula with his parents, Nick and Mary.
And when he walked in the room, it would just light up because he was just a real character.
But last year, for reasons Joe's family could never fathom, their fun-loving son suddenly changed.
Started lying a lot, would stay in bed a lot. He would stay in bed for hours.
And then in January this year, a knock on the door changed everything.
Police came around on the Friday night actually and said to me that he was deceased, and I just, obviously was just in shock because I just thought maybe he'd been murdered. I really had no idea.
In fact, Joe had taken his own life.
And on the day of the funeral, the police rang and said that the coroner had rung them and said that he had taken this drug, a euthanasia drug that was in his system.
That drug was nembutal. Mary Waterman has now discovered Joe wrote about his depression on his iPad.
Things like, I feel trapped, I can't go on like this, I'm no good.
The iPad provided more clues. Joe had bought a copy of Dr. Philip Nitschke's Euthanasia how-to guide online.
My husband found the Peaceful Pill book and he went through it, and it actually went into great detail about different ways to die and nembutal, where to get it from, who to order it from. So it was quite detailed. I was angry, I was quite angry that it was just so easy for him to access.
Dr. Nitschke's book claims to be the leading authority on assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia for elderly or seriously ill adults. To buy it, you're supposed to be over 50 years old. All Joe Waterman had to do was tick a box declaring he was.
Well, he's obviously a liar because straight away the book is not made available to people unless they're 50 years of age or more, unless there's special circumstances. So I guess if he wants to tell us those lies and accesses the book and then misuses it, I guess we can't always be able to protect against that. It's a tragedy.
With respect, Dr. Nitschke, all you have to do is tick a box to say you're over 50.
The same thing as you tick a box when you get on an airplane and say you don't have explosives in your luggage. Do you tick that box? Because I do, and that apparently is good enough for Qantas.
Joe was a liar, but of course you're going to lie if you want to get something, if you're suicidal and you want to get something that's going to help you to die peacefully.
Joe Waterman's parents are now preparing to bury his ashes on their property.
So this is where we'll bury him. This is his favourite tree, do you think?
Yeah.
I think it's a great spot to come down to and think of Joe.
Yeah.
So
it was where he came, so every time I come down here I feel that I'm with him for a moment.
yeah.
What impact has Joe's death had on you and your family?
It's just like a bad dream, really. I just still find it really hard to imagine life without him, really.
Mary Waterman is pushing for an inquest into her son's death and action to protect other vulnerable people.
I don't want this happening to anybody else. My concern is that it's very easily accessible and it's lethal. It will kill you.
Caitlin Gribbin and Dale Owens with that report, and anyone seeking support and information about suicide can contact Lifeline on 131 114 or Beyond Blue 1300 22 46 36.